And although you kind of know that this might happen, you don't really think about it very much.
The heavy silence that has surrounded the royal household and the self-exiled Sussex family for months was suddenly shattered by the one individual the public least expected to break the sacred palace ranks. Princess N, known globally for her unwavering discipline, fierce loyalty to the crown, and deep respect for royal protocol, has reportedly authorized the release of 3 highly classified, sealed letters bearing the private and definitive words of the late Queen Elizabeth II. Within mere moments of this information circulating among top constitutional correspondents, everything the global public believed about the ongoing feud between Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the British monarchy began to completely collapse. These documents were not affectionate, routine family notes sent across the Atlantic, nor were they simple holiday greetings. Instead, they contained direct instructions, stern warnings, and one final royal promise that had apparently been deliberately buried by high-ranking palace officials before it could ever be honored or implemented. The Princess Royal had closely guarded these explosive pages through 18 months of immense tension and media warfare, keeping them securely locked inside a private case at her Gatcombe Park residence while the rest of the family engaged in endless public arguments over official titles, international security arrangements, financial independence, and restricted family access. Queen Elizabeth II had written these letters separately to King Charles, Prince Harry, and her daughter, specifically ordering that they be opened and acted upon only if the unresolved Sussex dispute began to fundamentally threaten the stability and core integrity of the monarchy. For Princess N, the long delay by palace administrators had finally transformed into open defiance of her late mother's wishes, and she decided that she could no longer allow an orchestrated silence to rewrite the true intentions of the deceased sovereign. The reaction inside the royal walls was immediate and chaotic. King Charles received his verified copy of the letter in his morning study at Highgrove House, and upon reading the first few paragraphs, he reportedly lowered himself slowly into his chair, rendered completely speechless by the realization that his own sister had bypassed the entire palace machinery to expose the truth. His immense pain stemmed not just from the public exposure, but from the realization that the hidden decisions made behind closed doors were now laid bare for the world to judge. Meanwhile, across the ocean in California, the reaction was filled with a mixture of heavy grief and profound shock. Prince Harry read his grandmother's words while Meghan watched her long-standing suspicion finally turn into undeniable proof of betrayal by the institution. The Duke of Sussex reportedly covered his eyes, whispering that his grandmother had understood their fears far more than anyone in London had ever been willing to admit. The core of the crisis rests on the late Queen's warning that completely excluding the Sussex children from the family structure could create a permanent emotional wound carried directly into the next generation. Princess Anne's decisive move was not an act of petty rebellion against her brother's reign, but rather a profound act of ultimate obedience to the late Queen's final commands, because she believed that the symbolic power of the crown was being used to delay justice rather than protect the family's future. For Meghan Markle, the revelation brought a complicated wave of comfort and betrayal, knowing that the legendary monarch had never viewed her as a mere obstacle to be removed, but had explicitly stated in writing that any future reconciliation would fail unless she was fully respected as Harry's wife and the mother of royal grandchildren. This unexpected intervention effectively destroyed the false narrative that peace within the House of Windsor required her total exclusion. A tense, emotionally charged phone call quickly took place between the king and the Princess Royal, where Charles demanded to know why she had not trusted him to settle the sensitive family matter privately, to which Anne firmly responded that private solutions had been promised too often but delivered too rarely. Prince William also received the documents just moments before an official public engagement, causing him to dismiss his senior aides and stand completely alone in a private room for 10 minutes to process the gravity of the letters before requesting an urgent meeting with his father. The late Queen's hidden blueprint did not offer Prince Harry an unrestricted, triumphant return to the front lines of royal duty, but instead proposed a highly structured compromise involving limited Commonwealth work, protected private family visits, and an independent future security review. However, The revealing nature of these letters forces the entire world to ask one critical question. What exactly transpired during a secret winter meeting at Sandringham that convinced Queen Elizabeth II that her final wishes would require Princess Anne's extraordinary protection to ever see the light of day? Every royal crisis has a defining moment that appears deceptively insignificant until history turns back and recognizes it as the absolute point of no return for an entire dynasty. For this bitter conflict, that exact moment came during a private winter meeting at Sandringham Estate, 6 months before the late Queen's passing, where no television cameras were present and no formal announcements followed. Inside that quiet room, the late monarch made a direct request concerning Prince Harry's young family and watched it meet instant resistance from the very people expected to carry out her sovereign will. Princess Anne never forgot what happened next, as she watched the conversation drift away from core family duty and toward cold public strategy. Queen Elizabeth II had summoned Charles and 2 senior household advisors to discuss a written plan that would stop the Sussex separation from becoming a permanent constitutional wound. The Queen proposed a careful compromise where Harry would remain outside the group of working royals who officially represent the monarch at public engagements, but he could still support selected Commonwealth projects. Crucially, the plan demanded regular private contact between the sovereign and Archie and Lilibet because she believed the children should never become collateral damage in an adult conflict. The meeting changed dramatically when the monarch instructed that a confidential memorandum protecting the children's family status be drafted within 14 days. One senior advisor immediately objected, warning that any concession would weaken the palace's public position against the Sussexes' media attacks, and Charles heard the objection without overruling it. The Queen closed the folder before her and looked directly at her eldest son, asking if the family was now governed solely by fear of tomorrow's headline. Later, Anne warned her mother that institutional delay would allow officials to bury the settlement beneath layers of palace procedure. Charles felt trapped between loyalty to the institution and fear of future media leaks, believing Harry's explosive interviews had damaged trust beyond repair. 2 days later, the Queen wrote the 3 letters, instructing Anne to preserve a separate record of her wishes, because the promised memorandum was quietly placed under indefinite review. Anne's recent release now threatened to expose the exact initials of the official who froze that plan, leading to a tense, face-to-face confrontation behind a closed door at the palace. Charles entered believing he could persuade his sister to halt the remaining documents, while Anne knew the first copies were already beyond palace control. The king's control finally cracked as he accused her of humiliating his leadership during a fragile period for the monarchy. He argued that the crown could not be governed by private emotion while Harry's memoir continued to shake public trust, but Anne did not retreat. She told Charles that authority did not give him permission to erase their mother's final intention simply because they had become inconvenient for the palace communications team. And then revealed the evidence she had kept back, a photocopy of the frozen Sandringham memorandum carrying the initials of the king's former principal private secretary. Charles finally admitted the truth that he had seen the document after his mother's death and had chosen not to revive it because he believed Harry's actions made the plan impossible. The battle was no longer only about Harry and Meghan returning, but about who possessed the ultimate power to define the late Queen's legacy and whether even a reigning king could overrule it. Royal power rarely announces itself with an open declaration of war, moving instead through delayed signatures, administrative reviews, and carefully managed security assessments behind palace walls. As the contents of the late Queen's letters spread throughout the United Kingdom and across the globe, the public finally witnessed how sacred family promise had been systematically weakened, one procedural decision at a time. Prince William read his grandmother's profound warning twice before his urgent meeting with the king, standing entirely alone to process the reality that the Sussex children had become leverage in a long-standing adult dispute. While the future king still deeply distrusted Harry's public media campaigns, he could no longer defend a palace policy that was far harsher than anything the late monarch had ever authorized. In California, the official notification that all pending changes affecting Archie and Lilibet's royal status had been suspended brought no immediate celebration, as Harry and Meghan had to carefully evaluate whether this movement represented genuine structural change or merely another strategic palace retreat. A historic private call was soon arranged directly between King Charles and Prince Harry, completely bypassing the monarchy's administrative machinery, leaving father and son to speak without advisors, scripts, or protective legal shields. During this intense dialogue, the king openly admitted that he had confused bureaucratic caution with family protection, recognizing that his continued silence had sounded exactly like absolute rejection to his younger son. In a breakthrough moment of honesty, they agreed to permanently separate institutional royal duties from private family access, ensuring that the children's futures would never again be trapped within the unresolved conflicts of the past. When Princess Anne received the documented summary of their historic agreement, she authorized one final public statement confirming that written safeguards for Archie and Lilibet were being legally prepared. The definitive settlement did not automatically erase years of public accusation or reunite the fractured family through simple sentiment, but it successfully forced the crown to draw a clear line between constitutional disagreement and institutional cruelty. Through Princess Anne's courageous decision to break the silence, King Charles maintained his reigning authority, Harry and Meghan preserved their complete independence, and the late Queen's final principle was honored as Archie and Lilibet regained their rightful, protected connection to the House of Windsor.
The Sussex settlement touched every sensitive pressure point at once. Harry's security